Welcome to Learning to Glow, a show about wellness, skin health, and self-development. I'm your host, Jess. I'm a mom, entrepreneur, and skincare expert. I'm so excited to share tips on how to achieve healthy skin and bring amazing guests in the field of health, fitness, aging gracefully, and personal growth. Let's explore all different ways we can take care of ourselves as women, both inside and out, to truly shine. So let's get glowing. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this week with me. And we have a fabulous episode with Elizabeth Katzman. She is a perimenopause coach and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. She shares her journey from being a lawyer to becoming a health coach, specializing in hormone health during perimenopause, which is such a hot topic right now. And we've talked about it a few times on the show. I really loved this particular discussion because we delve into some common challenges women face during perimenopause, such as anxiety, sleep, hormonal imbalances, of course, but also highlighting the importance of our liver health and gut health during this time. She gave us a lot of practical advice on hormone replacement therapy, or HRT, and even talked a little bit about hormone replacement therapy, the differences between bioidentical hormones over synthetic. And she's just wonderful at breaking down these topics. And I learned some new things today, which I am so excited about, because these, leaving with like some practical, tangible tips from a podcast episode is so helpful. So I always appreciate a guest that can do that for us like Elizabeth did today. I will make sure to leave her information in the show notes, and go and follow her on Instagram. Enjoy this episode, and we will see you next time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Learning to Glow podcast. Today, we have Elizabeth Katzman. You are a perimenopause coach and other things that I'm going to have you share with us. But first, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So happy to have you. You know, I was just saying before we hit record, the majority of women who are listening to this podcast are in perimenopause, or they're dealing with a lot of things. I talk to women all the time who are sharing with me their struggles, and this is going to be really helpful. So before we get into our topics, could you just tell us a little about yourself and what you do, and then we can go from there?
Sure. I mean, basically, I had a big career switch after having kids. I was a lawyer and then stay-at-home mom. And then my children started having some issues, ear infections that were recurring, continuous antibiotic use. And I just felt like it didn't feel right to me. So I did some research, decided to stop giving them dairy. They never got another ear infection. So I went back to school for nutrition, became functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. And then I started working with basically mom friends, because things come up on the playground. It really was not my intention to have this as a career. And I was like, oh, sure, I can help you with this and that. And then as everyone started getting a little older into perimenopause and menopause, I went to do more continuing education at A4M and various other institutes, and did mentorships with doctors to get a more in-depth understanding of perimenopause, because there's such a lack of education and understanding out there. And it feels really great to be able to provide women with information at what is really reverse puberty.
You're certified with FDN. Is that what it is? The FDN program?
Yeah, FDN. And then at A4M, I did multiple certifications with hormones and hormone replacement. So they deal mainly with doctors, but anyone can take the course. It just doesn't count for continuing education credit, but it's available for certification. And it's interesting because their programs have been incredible, but there's a lot of contradictory information out there. It really is the Wild West. So you can do a certification program and one person will say, oh yeah, I get urinary metabolites. And the next lecturer will say, urinary metabolites don't matter. So it's been years of putting it together, and the mentorships and clinical practice has really helped, because what you see then in your clients is what you know works.
Yeah.
At the end of
I had a podcast guest who was also with FDN and had his own personal experience of like a lot of skin disorders and gut issues, and was able to really heal himself with that program, and like so much so that he became certified. And it's not something that a lot of people know about. And I want to talk about gut health today and things like that. But first, when you're talking to those moms on the playground, and you're talking to moms who are like I'm in perimenopause, what are some of their biggest challenges and struggles that they're having? Hormones is a big topic, so tell us what you hear and what their biggest struggles are.
I think, first of all, it's hard to grasp what's happening because it happens young and we feel like we're too young for like the M word to even come into play. But the reality is, it comes into play earlier and earlier, and even 20-year-olds these days, because liver and gut health are so poor in our toxic load. We're just so overburdened, and you see it with men and chronically declining testosterone levels. What I see the most is anxiety. So, a woman that has never dealt with anxiety or depression will all of a sudden be very nervous about where their kids are, and if they're driving, do they make it there safely? There's a lot of ruminating, a lot of lying in bed at night, overthinking things and having a hard time falling asleep. Sleep becomes a major issue. And it sort of snowballs because then if you're not sleeping, that makes everything else harder to do. And things can kind of unravel quickly.
So it's so funny because I've shared this personally on the show, but my anxiety has gotten worse as I've gotten into this part of my life. And it wasn't until recently where I was like, that's a symptom. And I just thought that's that's good to know, because we're not really told that that has anything to do with anything. And what I hear is that what happens is women go see their doctor, and instead of dealing with, oh, this could be because of a hormone issue or whatever, they just get handed like a medication. And so instead of worrying about why this is happening, and then also that snowball effect of then your sleep is affected, because that has happened to me too. And then you're in trouble when your sleep is affected, I feel like. So is that something that you've seen? Like, is that kind of what happens when they go to the doctor, when they're coming to them with these issues?
Yes, and you can end up on a lot of medications very quickly because you'll end up with an SSRI. You can end up on a birth control pill. You can end up with sleep medication. And really, at the end of the day, all your body really needs is hormones. Now, maybe you'll need something in addition, but for the majority of women, you'll just need some hormones. And it happens at different times. So progesterone is typically the first hormone to decline. And this is in general terms, every woman's different, but in general, progesterone declines first. And so that's why anxiety is an issue. A lot of women are adding in testosterone right away. I'm not sure why that's become trending lately. I don't know if you've noticed that. I've seen it a lot, but testosterone is actually one of the last hormones to decline. And it also fights for the receptor site with estrogen. So if you're adding in testosterone before you're addressing estrogen, you can further throw off your estrogen. And so estrogen helps you stay asleep and progesterone helps you fall asleep. So it's really all of the hormones and how they interplay with one another. But the safest and easiest hormone to add in is progesterone, and women immediately feel less anxious, they sleep better. But if you're noticing that you're taking progesterone and you're falling asleep great, but you're still waking up in the middle of the night, that's an estrogen or blood sugar issue. So again, we've got insulin, cortisol, progesterone, testosterone. It's a lot. It's a symphony, and they all work together. So a lot of clinics will want to just simplify things, and the easiest way to simplify it is to put a woman on a birth control pill because it will regulate symptoms, and it's just enough synthetic estrogen to make a hot flash go away and to maybe make your anxiety feel a little better. So you might feel better, but because they're synthetic, they're not bioidentical and they're not actually protecting you. And the levels are so low that they're not going to be protecting your brain, your bones, your cardiovascular system. So it's really the things we don't see that are the big concerns. So for me, when I'm talking to a woman and she's saying all of a sudden she's anxious about things and she's having a hard time sleeping, I'm worried about her brain. and her bones and her cardiovascular system, because those things decline very rapidly in perimenopause and the first couple years in menopause. You can lose 20% of your bone mineral density. You lose your LDL receptors on your liver, so your cholesterol immediately goes up. I mean, that's another one that I see constantly is a woman will say, wow, my cholesterol just shot up and I didn't change anything. That's when you know you're dealing with estrogen is declining.
You know what? I would love to ask you about that since you brought it up, the cholesterol thing. That's another thing that I've heard too. And people are like, do I need to cut out meat? Do I need to cut out eggs? Like what happens? So that's a normal thing that can go up. Should we be worried about it? What should we do about it? Is it a diet change? What do you think for somebody like that?
So there's another common one where a doctor might say, take a statin, but we love our cholesterol because that's what makes our hormones. So we don't, and actually having higher cholesterol around 220 is associated with longevity. So the octogenarians, they all have higher cholesterol. But because our LDL receptors go down, as estrogen goes down, our cholesterol is just going to go up. So unless you're replacing estrogen, you're really not going to be able to chase that appropriately. And we don't want to reduce things like meat, and eggs especially have a lot of phosphatidylcholine. And that's how we conjugate our estrogens. And our phase 2 liver detox, it's super important that we have enough choline and cholesterol for that and for proper bile flow. So for someone who is concerned with cholesterol, you definitely don't want to be taking out the animal sources of protein. You want to look more towards replenishing estrogen in the same way that you would if you were insulin resistant or were no longer able to produce thyroid hormone, right? You would take insulin or take thyroid. It's the same type of thing. If your estrogen's going down and you're planning on living for another 50 years, 60 years, then you might want to add that back in.
Oh, that's so interesting because that's what you hear. You need to take out, certain things, but this is kind of just a result of like hormonal fluctuation. So it's so interesting because and it happened to me and I was like, what in the heck? Like I even got my lab results and my cholesterol was up and my doctor was not concerned because it wasn't like too high, but I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Cause like you said, I didn't do anything different.
No, I mean, and you can still work out and eat all the right foods and it won't matter. It will continue to climb. And so when you're 40, 45, 50, they'll tell you it's a little higher, a little higher, a little higher. And then when you're 60, they'll put you on a statin. When all along, really, you could have just been replacing your hormones and never gotten in that situation. And, all of that time, then there's calcification that builds up and, arteriosclerosis. And so we want to be protecting our arteries from the get-go, and start thinking about it. I really think late 30s, because
Wow.
I do see sleep and anxiety increasing a lot in women in their mid 30s. And
Yeah.
again, it has a lot to do with your liver health, with your gut health, with your amount of toxins that you are exposed to and have been exposed to, and your genetics, how well you are able to metabolize toxins. I personally don't. So when I was sick with mold illness, I had Hashimoto's for a minute, literally just for like a month, because my liver wasn't detoxing the mold. And you have to convert T4 to T3 in your liver. And my liver was too busy dealing with mold. So as soon as I cleaned the mold out, I could now convert and my thyroid was fine.
Wow. Like, okay, let's talk about the liver then. This is a good place. And I want to talk more about hormones and I'll write myself a note in my brain to go back. And I want to talk about the synthetic because if a doctor told me to get on birth control at this age, I would be really upset because I feel like they did a number on me when I was on them before. And the reason I was on them before is because my period was heavy and they needed to slow that down. And I was on it for so long that I think it really did some damage for me personally. But before I do that, so the liver, that is so insane to me that because of this liver and like processing the mold, that your all of a sudden your body is like showing up that it has Hashimoto's and then it went away. So why, obviously we know this is important. How do we have a healthy liver so that it can support us and our hormones and everything like that? And probably let's start with why is it so important? Then what can we do to make sure that it's supported in the right ways?
So we metabolize estrogen through our liver. And so before I would ever advise any woman to supplement estrogen, they should really make sure that their liver is optimized and their detox pathways are open, because you can feel a lot worse if you just start taking estrogen and your liver isn't functioning properly. And so there are some clues, and as an esthetician, right, with the rashes and the acne and all of the skin issues, that's a clue that your liver's not metabolizing estrogens properly. Also fibroids and fibroid breasts, cysts, mood. There's just so many little clues that can tell you that your liver's not metabolizing things properly. So we have 3 phases of liver detox. And basically, the keys to a healthy liver are the nuts and bolts that we all know. We should be eating a lot of greens, eating cruciferous vegetables will help with phase 1. We want to support bile flow, so we want to be thinking about onions and garlic and things like that. Turmeric is great. I personally do a castor oil pack every single night. It's my way of relaxing. I just put some castor oil right over my liver. I do some frankincense oils, and then I put on a heating pad, and I put on a towel so it doesn't get everywhere. And I'll just read or watch a show with my kids. It's my way of unwinding at night, but it does an incredible job with helping your liver out. But if you don't have all 3 phases, including going to the bathroom at least once a day, if you're not supporting all 3 phases, you're going to have circulating estrogens, and those become toxic, and those lead to issues. So that's why a lot of women will say, I took hormone replacement and I felt worse. I felt bloated. I felt cranky or overly tired, overly anxious. It can really go any different way. But if you support your liver and your detox pathways with proper methylation, there's expensive tests that you can do or not do. I mean, I will do Dutch tests if someone can afford it, but it is about $400, and there's a lot of different ways you could spend that money. So for a woman who's looking for more motivation, it can be a great tool, because you can lay it right out and say, listen, you can see right here that your phase 1 detox is clogged. We need to really focus on broccoli sprouts, and or you can see here that phase 2 is really clogged up. We need to focus on your methylation, methylated B vitamins. It can be very motivating and insightful, but if you want to save that money, just make sure if you're on HRT that you are hitting all of those check boxes, that you're really supporting your liver health and your your lymphatic system. I'm constantly working on my lymph, especially anyone who's had abdominal surgery or C-sections, because those surgeries will cut through your lymph and you'll have more stagnation. So you'll really want to focus more on dry brushing, or one of my favorite things to do is to stand in a pool. So swimming won't do it, but it's actually standing. So you get the systolic, you get the pressure from your ankles all the way up to your neck. It's great for lymphatic flow, and that supports your liver a great deal.
Oh, I've never heard of that. So just like literally standing in the pool up to your neck.
Yeah.
Is going to help with that. Oh, that's so interesting.
Just 10, 15 minutes. Yeah. So when I see these older women doing water aerobics and stuff, I'm like, yes, that's great.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So with the liver, this is going to obviously, because the bottom line is like, we need to support our hormones. So this is going to help with that process with our, a healthy liver. And then if we don't have that, say we don't want to do the testing at that time, we're trying to work on saving the money. What are some ways that you're just like, okay, I know that person is having an issue? And when you say like this phase 2 with methylation, is that with people who have that MTHFR?
It is a lot of times people with MTHFR, but because we're so overloaded with toxins these days, I find that most people need methylation support. And because not everyone's done their genetics, I recommend always doing methylated B vitamins So never folic acid, always methylated folate, just in case, because why not?
Yeah.
You might as well just take the methylated instead of the synthetic version if you don't know your genetics. And like I say, that perimenopause is reverse puberty. We also see all these things in puberty, and a lot of the moms I work with have teenage daughters and sons with acne, and they might not want to run these expensive tests. And the ones that do, what I see a lot these days is elevated beta glucuronidase. And so that's produced by your microbiome or your estrobolome, how we metabolize our estrogens. And so in phase 2 detox, when we have our estrogens conjugated in a nice little package, like a little present, if you have too much beta glucuronidase in your gut, it unpackages that present and it recirculates it, making it even more toxic. I'll see that a lot with girls with acne. And you can have elevated beta glucuronidase from just general dysbiosis, but a lot of it is ultra processed foods. And even someone who's eating a perfect diet may experience high levels. That's usually stress.
I know. I was going to ask, like, I bet a lot of these symptoms and, to help support our gut and our liver, I feel like a good place to start is always your diet, right? Like if you kind of clean that up and you take out the processed food, which is, especially if we're talking about teenagers, it's hard to do, especially if they're used to having so much. I mean, that alone could probably go pretty far. Is that true? Like as far as like dealing with this, or if you've already kind of been in a state where you're not detoxifying your liver in the right way and you're kind of sick with a lot of these things and your hormones are off, is it more than just, I mean, I know it's more than just a diet. Do people need to go much further than that?
Yeah, it's all connected. So we want to do the best that we can. And I do think it's easier with adults, but I have found teenagers to be very motivated, especially by acne.
Yeah.
When you explain the damage that ultra processed foods does, it's amazing how they'll get more motivated to even cook for themselves. I've seen that over and over. And stress is not to be underestimated. And as we're in perimenopause, as we were saying, that when progesterone is declining, we're really having a difficult time on a cellular level managing our stress. So, even though you're putting in all the work, trying to meditate and doing all the things that you're supposed to do, with declining hormones, we really do lose so much resiliency. So that you want to do it all, but it does help if hormones are declining to replace them. Because at the end of the day, our ovaries are going to wind down. They're in the winding down process. And then one day they're going to shut down business. So, it's great to do all of the natural things. You have to do it all. But then at the end of the day, it is going to stop manufacturing your hormones. But your adrenals are still producing a decent, if they're healthy, are still producing a little tiny bit, but a decent amount of testosterone. So that's why that tends to be the last one to go.
Oh, that's so interesting. I think it's important what you say about the stress. I've seen this in my life and with people that I know of, okay, we're going to get healthy and we want to make sure we're doing all the right things to support our bodies and optimally. And then that becomes a form of stress because you have to be perfect and you can't have this and you can't eat out. That even just makes my stomach hurt thinking about it. It's like, it's too much. It's so restrictive. So I think that could add to that thing that we're trying to avoid, which is, having stress and have it affect our body. And I want to talk you mentioned digestion. I want to talk about that and gut health a little bit. How does this pertain to maybe affecting our hormones, especially with gut health? I mean, that's so big. And speaking of like acne, or eczema, my son had a really bad case of eczema and his gut was a mess. He was eating something that he was allergic to and we didn't know. And so for like a year, he was just like, his gut was getting really torn up and he had an insane amount of eczema on his face. And it was like all because of his gut. And once we kind of healed that, his skin cleared. It was incredible. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that as it pertains to hormones.
Well, there's a bi-directional relationship, our hormones to our gut to our hormones. So you can get in a chicken or the egg situation, but we do lose as estrogen is declining, our lining of our gut is compromised. So we're more susceptible to leaky gut. there's quite a few supplements that I recommend for perimenopause. There's so many great ones these days, but really anything to help improve your gut lining, because honestly, even when you're on HRT, it's still really tough as we age to maintain the integrity of our gut lining. And again, I go back to, because I don't want to leave the kids out of this, because I know a lot of us listening have them, but even these young kids are having compromised gut linings because just toxins are headed at us from every directions, and drinking out of plastic bottles and the whole thing. But women's guts tend to look more like men's guts as we age and estrogen declines, and so you will see women develop more masculine features, and a lot of that has to do with the estrobolome and losing diversity and losing that gut integrity. And again, with the dysbiosis and the beta glucuronidase increasing is a huge one that I see all the time. So you just want to make sure when you're eating that you're envisioning, and I always picture like the little guys in my gut, that I'm really feeding them. And I want to make sure I'm feeding the good ones, not the bad ones. So that goes down to not having added sugars. Fruits are fine, but just not processed foods and added sugars. And I think we do, become more sensitive to that as we age. So nothing to be stressed out about. I mean, I feel like eat it all, but just eat real food, just real food, just to take out the labels. If you have to read a label, it might not be the best thing to eat.
Yeah. Especially if you're in this stage of life where, like, I always say, like, we can't get away with what we got away with before, at this age, like, we have to really be more mindful. And I want to talk about hormone, because you say HRT, hormone replacement therapy. I have talked to a lot of women lately that this isn't something that it's not in their radar.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's like really suffering from some perimenopausal symptoms, like all of them. I want to ask you too, like, what are some common ones to look out for? The anxiety one, women may not know that's a common thing, but like for some reason, some women are like hesitant, or they've been told like maybe it's not so good, or it's their doctors aren't recommending it. And it could be something that's really helpful to them. So maybe you could start with telling us if you're dealing with some of these symptoms, what are some things to look out for? And then have you seen that? Is there some hesitancy around it, or are people open to it? I'm just curious to see what you've seen.
There is a lot of fear, and I
Okay.
want women to understand that it's nothing that they're doing wrong, and that they can be eating the most perfect diet, meditating every morning, writing in their gratitude journal, like getting 40 grams of fiber and a gram of protein per pound of body weight, and check all the boxes. And they still are having anxiety, sleep disturbances, weight gain, hot flashes. So, I want them to associate that to what we're not seeing. If you're feeling a hot flash, think cardiovascular system. Your cardiovascular system is at risk. Your brain's ability to monitor temperature, so your brain's at risk. If you're feeling anxiety, your brain. So I want women to really understand that these symptoms are so much more than what they're feeling in the moment. They're really our long-term health. And we have to think about ourselves when we're in our 70s, 80s, 90s, that we want to be independent. We don't want to be breaking bones. Bones decline very quickly. And, a third of women who get a hip fracture will not make it past the first year, and another third will never have independence after that. So bone health is a huge issue, and our hormones play a huge role in that. But there is a lot of fear around that. In 2002, there was a study called the Women's Health Initiative. And so if any of you are with doctors that were in medical school around them, those doctors are particularly reluctant to give hormones. Basically, the study's been debunked. And they just about a year or two ago came out and very clearly said that it was a poorly done study. The women in the study were not of the appropriate age group that you would want. They were given synthetic hormones, not identical. They were given oral estrogen, not topical. We now know that yes, oral estrogen does increase your risk of stroke and blood clots. And so when you're looking at hormone replacement, you wouldn't want oral estrogen. You do topical or injections, and then that takes away the risk. Also in the study, they were using progestins, not progesterone.
Mm.
And so that's really the difference. And so there's a lot of nuance when it comes to HRT, and a lot of women, when they go to their doctor asking about it, they'll say, no, that causes cancer. We can't, no. And that's why they think that, because they're still thinking back to that study in 2002.
It's not just the women that, yeah, they're fearful and maybe they think, I don't know, I'm giving up or I'm not, I'm leaning on something that I don't need to, but it's also the doctors that are coming from that place a lot of times that are hesitant in giving us what we need. And maybe you can break down, you said synthetic versus the bioidentical. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? And is that true for all of the supplements like the estrogen, the testosterone, the progesterone? Is that important for each of those that they're bioidentical, or tell me about that?
There is a lot of chatter in the universe right now on the fact that, bioidentical is just a marketing term and, it doesn't really matter. But they do, in fact, have different molecular structures. And you can get, though, it's easy to get. Most estrogen is actually bioidentical. So the patch, for example, that's covered under insurance is bioidentical. I personally don't love the patch because it doesn't usually get your estradiol levels high enough, meaning about 65 or above, to protect your bone health. It's just it's enough to get rid of your hot flashes and make you feel better. So there's nuance there. And then progestins are very pro-inflammatory, whereas progesterone is anti-inflammatory. So the difference in molecular structure affects the way your body responds, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not covered under insurance. You can still get progesterone and bioidentical estradiol covered under insurance. So it's not necessarily a traditional MD thing versus a functional doctor at all. You just have to ask. But the main thing with estrogen is that you don't want it to be oral. So it does really bother me and a close girlfriend of mine who's a doctor, we were out to dinner just a week ago, and one of the women asked her if she was taking HRT, and she said she was. And I said, oh, what form are you taking? She said, I'm on the pill. Ugh. And so we had a long talk the next day, and she's switching. But but she's a doctor, and she really didn't realize that that's not hormone replacement. First of all, it's oral estrogen, which as we age, our risk of clot and stroke increases. So we never want to be doing estrogen orally. And for our teenage girls, like you said, I had the same experience with the pill. We don't want to be putting our teens on the pill. It's a lazy way to take care of someone. If someone's having issues with their menstrual cycle, it's related to their gut, to their liver, to their toxic load, to their stress, to the ultra processed foods, to all the things. But a doctor's not going to want to spend time with that. If they give you a pill, it's going to stabilize your cycle because you're not going to have a cycle anymore. That bleed's not a menstruation, it's a withdrawal bleed.
Yeah, I think that's important to note because, if I would have known then what I know now, obviously I wouldn't have. But what are some things that you see? Have you seen the repercussions of people that are on, and did you have them, like for being on the birth control pill? Because I can tell you, I did not have ovarian cysts and endometriosis before. I'm not saying that's the cause of it, but like I had a lot of issues. And then I finally got off of it, but I feel like things changed once I started it. And granted, I was on it for a long time.
Well, it automatically is depleting you of your B vitamins, of your ability to methylate, which is so important with endometriosis, especially considering a lot of women with endometriosis have difficulty detoxing as it is. So the pill is inhibiting that. It's also a progestin. It's not progesterone. So you're not getting the benefits of progesterone on your uterine lining in the same way that you would. And it's affecting your bone health because you're blocking your own body's production of these natural hormones at an age where it's really important to be building our bone health. And then again, later in life where it's important to be maintaining it. So for me personally, my issues were not physical, they were mental. I got depressed. I had an eating disorder. I went on an SSRI, which was very hard to get off of. And I think that it's a common pattern to see a young woman go on the pill and then go on an SSRI within a few years.
Wow, I didn't know that. I was thinking about the fact that it also hurts your ability to process things and like the methylation that you talked about. I also have MTHFR. I'm like talking about all this stuff. I'm like, no wonder I've had health issues. That makes complete sense after all this. Like I had gut issues, like the antibiotics that you were saying, that got you intrigued in this field in the first place with your children. Like that was me. I was like always on antibiotics. I was always sick. And yeah, it's just interesting to see the domino effect and then the repercussions of that. And sometimes, it doesn't happen overnight. Like you can cruise, and especially when you're young, and get through this stuff and not realize or not put two and two together. But it's so interesting. And as far as like the perimenopausal women that are listening and they're having some like, they're uncomfortable. Like they're thinking like, this is just how I feel now. I know energy and fatigue is a really big one. What would you tell those women? Where do they start? Like the friend that I'm telling you about, that she was just hesitant about taking hormones, but dealing with so many things that maybe could be helped if she got on this. What would you say to those women who are maybe hesitant, or where else should they look into getting some help?
Yeah, you mentioned energy. We really didn't talk about mitochondrial function, but estradiol plays such a key role in mitochondrial function. So yes, people are going to feel tired and more lethargic. And us women, we can like do it all and raise these kids and work and do the whole thing. And then to hit a brick wall like that can be so frustrating when you're doing all the same things. And it is difficult to know where to begin. And I would say to find a trusted practitioner. There are more and more good ones out there. And before you enter HRT, just make sure that you're optimizing your liver health. Really I like to keep things simple and just stay as natural as possible. So my first golden rule is like, just don't eat anything out of a bag or a box. Just stick with fruits, vegetables, meats, grains if they agree with your stomach. You can skip them if they don't. Everything kind of in moderation. I don't like to get too crazy, and just check in with your intuition. I mean, things like cold plunges and saunas and all that are great, but if you're burnt out, like now is not the time. But to find a trusted practitioner is really important. There's a lot of noise out there, but there are a lot of great ones.
Yeah, and getting that guidance and support is so important. So why don't you, if you could tell us where people can find you and like where to find you, how to work with you, and then I will make sure to link everything in the show notes as well.
Oh, thank you. My company is called Strong Choices. So I'm strongchoices.com, and then my Instagram is strongchoices1, and I try to post educational content as much as I can.
Okay, awesome. This is so helpful. I really appreciate it. I'm in the thick of this too, so it's really appreciated, and I know our listeners will benefit from it. So thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Please subscribe and review so we can reach more people who want to learn to glow alongside us. See you next time.